Okay, so I thought we would look more closely at the men in power at Shawshank Prison and discuss the hypocrisy and corruption that exists within the upper echelons of that power structure that we talked about. So at the top, the men who run the prison, they're just as, they're just as much criminals as the men that they are in control of, the prisoners themselves. So this corruption and hypocrisy is evident in the wardens and the guards of Shawshank Prison. We've already met Byron Hadley, so he was the guard who Andy gives financial advice to, and he's depicted in the film and in the book as a very violent man. So for Hadley, Red describes him on page 44. Both Hadley and Stamas. They would really would kill you just as soon as look at you. So for these men, violence and punishment are their sort of attitudes or the main sort of what is motivating their relationship with the prisoners. They don't see themselves as sort of helping in the rehabilitation of the men. They are just there as sort of brutal, violent, and exploiting their labor as well. So they don't see any value in the prisoners, and they would just as soon kill you as look at you. So you are worthless in their eyes. And we saw in that rooftop scene, Hadley was just about to throw Andy over and call it an accident, right? So there's a lot of sort of corruption behind the scenes going on in terms of the cover-up of these kinds of murders and the sort of prison system sort of not being accountable for its corruption and criminal activity. So in the book, we have three different wardens depicted. In the film, there's just one warden, Samuel Norton, and he seems to embody all of the corruption. But in the book, we have multiple wardens that take on this leadership role, and all of them are corrupt and self-serving. So as we go along, I've sort of included this little table, and you can take notes or highlight the pages of the book. And I'll talk briefly about each one of these authority figures and how they sort of represent ideas related to corruption or hypocrisy. So the first one that we can talk about is George Dennehy, and he's introduced on page 41. So I'll just read you a passage. So the fellow running the show in 1950 was a prissy-looking down east Yankee named George Dennehy. He had a degree in penal administration. No one liked him, as far as I could tell, except the people who had gotten him his appointment. I heard he was only interested in three things: compiling statistics for a book, which was later published by a small New England outfit called Lightside Press, where he probably had to pay to have it done, which team won the intramural baseball championship each September, and getting a death penalty passed in Maine. A regular bearer for the death penalty was George Dennehy. He was fired off the job in 1953. When it came out, he was running a discount auto repair service down in the prison garage and splitting the profits with Byron Hadley and Greg Stamas. So George Dennehy is kicked out for running this prison garage where he is sort of running illicit schemes to get money and profiting from this prison business. And he is motivated not by a belief that the prisoners are valuable, worthy people who are capable of being rehabilitated and re-enter into society. He is what Red calls a bear for the death penalty. So he believes strongly in the death penalty. And obviously punishment then is uppermost in his mind in regards to how to treat prisoners. So if he had his way, all prisoners with life sentences would be put to death. And and he is, again, very much corrupt and does not, only is sort of self-serving, right? He's concerned about compiling statistics for his book and profiting through this garage, and he just believes in sort of the administrative side of prison, right? So he has a degree in penal administration, so for him it's all about maintaining that system. He doesn't really care about the men themselves. And Dennehy is eventually kicked out of the prison, and he's investigated. The newspaper reporters sort of catch him in this scandal, and he's sent packing and then replaced by Greg Stamas. And Stamas is described on page 41 at the bottom. So Greg Stamas was a short man with a tight, hard gut and the coldest brown eyes you ever saw. He always had a painful, pursed little grin on his face as if he had to go to the bathroom and couldn't quite manage it. During Stamas's tenure as warden, there was a lot of brutality at Shawshank, and although I have no proof, I believe there may be half a dozen moonlight burials in the stand of scrub forest that lies east of the prison. Dennehy was bad, but Greg Stamas was a cruel, wretched, cold-hearted man. So Dennehy is very much, he was corrupt and he took money, but Stamas is violent, and his corruption extends as far as these moonlight burials that Red is talking about. So what he's talking about there is sort of unexplained murders of inmates. They would maybe say that it was an accidental death, but they're really sort of hiding over murder. So if an inmate opposed them, they could easily just, write him off, kill him, and then cover it over and cover their corruption that way. So violence is very much a part of Stamas's agenda, and he is also involved with the laundering of money. So that does not stop with George Dennehy. On page 54, Stamas succeeded him, and for the next 6 years of Shawshank was a kind of living hell. During the reign of Greg Stamas, the beds in the infirmary and the cells in the solitary wing were always full. And then Stamas is investigated by reporters, and eventually he ran. He could have been convicted, but he avoided that by disappearing. And then Byron Hadley, who was also involved, he was the head guard, he had a heart attack and took an early retirement, and he also avoided prison. But as Red says, the names at the top change, but the rackets never do. So each warden that comes in is involved in some sort of criminal behavior. So in this regard, they are what we would call hypocrites, right? They present themselves as law-abiding citizens, as touting the ideas of rehabilitation, and that they are trying to teach the convicts to improve their lives and rehabilitate them in some way. But they're really just as, if not worse, because they put up a front that they are better than, or that they are innocent. And then we get Samuel Norton, and he's introduced on page 56. So he, like the other men, is also involved in illicit activity. But he is known for his sort of religious beliefs. So in this regard, he's even more of a hypocrite. So on page 56, we had another warden by then, a man named Samuel Norton. The Mathers, Cotton, and Increase would have felt right at home with Sam Norton. So far as I know, no one had ever seen him so much as crack a smile. He had a 30-year pin from the Baptist Advent Church of Eliot. His major innovation as the head of our happy family was to make sure that each incoming prisoner had a New Testament. He had a small plaque on his desk, gold letters inlaid in teakwood, which said, "Christ is my Savior." A sampler on the wall made by his wife read, "His judgment cometh, and that right early." The latter sentiment cut zero ice with most of us. He had a Bible quote for every occasion, did Mr. Sam Norton, and whenever you meet a man like that, my best advice to you would be to grin big and cover up your balls with both hands. So Samuel Norton's known for his use of solitary punishments, and this is where the men would be sort of taken away from their cells and put in a room with very, just pretty much just a room, no light, no real washroom. You'd have to use a bucket, and he administered a grain and drain diet, so bread and water diets. And then on page 57, Red describes Norton as the most foulest hypocrite that I ever saw in a high position. The rackets I told you about earlier continued to flourish, but Sam Norton added his own new wrinkles, and he knew all about them. So even more corruption and more programs that bring in this illicit money. It was Warden Norton who instituted the Inside Out program. You may have read about it 16 or 17 years back. It was even written up in Newsweek and the press. It sounded like a real advance in practical corrections and rehabilitation. There were prisoners out cutting pulpwood, prisoners repairing bridges and causeways, prisoners constructing potato cellars. Norton called it Inside Out and was invited to explain it in damn near every Rotary and Kiwanis club in New England. And there was Norton skimming off the top. There were 100 ways to do it, men, materials, you name it. And the men were used, prison labor is slave labor. So Norton sort of uses the prisoners as his own slave labor and then profits off of their labor. So he's a hypocrite in the sense that he is on the outside very much about his religious beliefs, and he is very self-righteous, but on the inside he is very corrupt, greedy, and a cruel person, right? So there is hypocrisy in the way he presents himself versus how he actually acts behind the scenes, and he becomes sort of the greatest antagonist in terms of Andy's sort of struggle against this prison system. Andy's role in this sort of corrupt system, he becomes a kind of sort of financial, he gives a financial advice and does all of the banking for the prison. So he knows all of the sort of illicit schemes going on behind the scenes. And since helping Hadley with his tax problem, Andy sort of becomes part of so he does all the banking for the prison itself and helps the wardens and all the corruption take place. So he's the one behind the scenes funneling the money to make it seem as if everything on the surface is honest and legal. So they had Andy, this is page 52, they just set him to work washing dirty money instead of dirty sheets. He funneled it into stocks, bonds, tax-free, municipals, you name it. And Andy's role, he is sort of behind the scenes, and he uses his clout with the warden to maintain his single cell, and so he doesn't have to share his cell with anybody, and he has other perks. He's protected now from the guards against the sisters who had been causing him trouble. So he benefits in ways from his intelligence and his banking skills. So he's able to use these skills to maintain his safety and receive some perks for it.